we are never truly lost. Well, okay, sure. Maybe we get turned around for a few days in the woods, where life just feels like it's getting the best of us and everything's going wrong. And I'm Mike Martin, and I've stood right where you're standing, lost, beaten down, like nothing's ever gonna change. And that's why I built this camp. And that's why I'm inviting you to join me and all the members of this wild community. Because you know what, friend? It does get better. So come along with me into the wild and let me show you this awesome, unique skill set that lays within inside of you. With help from the land, we're going to unlock the steward that's inside each and every one of us that will lead the way out of the darkness and into healing. Here at the Camp of Healing on Project Mindfully Outdoors. Purpose, discovering purpose. You know, we look for this magical thing within the world to define who we are. We often hope that it's given to us without having to exert too much of our precious energy. But the fact of the matter is, in order to get there and in order to discover that purpose, you have to invest within yourself. You have to expend that energy that you think you're storing away for something else. Because in reality, you're carrying that energy with you in order to discover that purpose. You know, it makes me think of a story that I heard once about this young man who, when he was born to a man and a woman that had been childless for quite some time. And they really doted on him when he was born. He was everything to them. And as he grew up, he did like most members of every tribe did. And he learned how to hunt. He learned how to be a warrior. And he wasn't much more than average. You know, he was just kind of there. The unique thing about him was the fact that he could walk through a village and no one would notice. He was never invited to any warrior councils, anything of the sort. And as he grew up, he was so outcasted that his parents wondered if he would ever win a wife. And that was just kind of the way things were for him. He found a wife later on down the line after his parents had passed away. And with her, he had a daughter. And even at that point, this young man was still trying to figure out his purpose, trying to figure out his point, the reason that he was here. And through the process, he began to feel more and more alone. So that burden on his shoulders of not having a true point, true purpose, along with a lack of support, led him deeper and deeper into the woods. He began to explore and become intimately connected with the land. He knew of trails and different areas that nobody else knew of, let alone how to get to. Through that, through the course of that, he began to resign himself to the fact that he was only put here to create his daughter, to be a part of her life, who was everything that this young man wasn't. She was outgoing. She was popular. She was well known. And looking at that and having that lack of purpose, it left him hurt. And it like I said, like I had mentioned, it sent him deeper and deeper into the woods. And he come back one time from one of these adventures to find that all the men of the tribe had gone off on a war party. And there was only himself, the women, children, and some older men that were still behind at camp. One of the scouts came back to camp and mentioned that there was a rival war party on their way. And given the status of camp, everyone knew that had they fled and began to run, this war party would catch up with them extremely quickly because women, children, and the elderly people of camp could only move so fast. Being on horses, the war party would catch them with no problem. But this young man knew of an area, of a place that they could go and be safe. It was high atop a butte, very hard to get to, very hard to climb and reach the top. So the remaining members of the tribe counseled and they agreed to go along with this young man's plan. And they set off. Within a day or so, they reached the butte. And while the climb was difficult, they made the climb and everyone reached the top. When the war party finally caught up with them, they had much more of a difficult time climbing the butte. In fact, they didn't reach the top because the people that were there were defending themselves and preventing them from the war party from climbing. So eventually the war party gave up and left, and all the members of the tribe were good. They were safe and they could continue on. And as they came back to camp and they regrouped with the rest of the people, they spoke of what happened. And they shared the fact that it was this young man and his intimate knowledge of the land that brought them to safety, that brought them through. So from that, they honored this young man. They gave him a new name. They they offered him the name of Good Trail because he knew of all the good trails and the course of life had brought him to this trail, which was good and saved his village. Now, what it is that I take out of that story that is so important to me is the fact that regardless of where we stand, how we feel, and where we're at in life, we still look at things that we do on this level that there's got to be more. It feels unfulfilling. And some of those things that we do, they backfire. They don't go the way that we intended them to. And you could even call them a failure. However, as those failures continue to build up and build up within the backpack, we start to look at ourselves and we start to put labels. We start to put titles upon how we look at ourselves in the mirror, such as we're broken, we're a failure, we're not good enough, we're not worthy. And that comes out of that shrouded and lowered version of the way that we see the world. Because in reality, when you look at everything that you've gone through and every step that you've made, whether it's been a success, it's helped you to where you think you're trying to go, or you've had to look at the ground in shame because it didn't work, because it didn't go the way that you wanted it to. Each one of those steps have brought you to that point of having something to contribute, just like Good Trail. Good Trail had that intimate knowledge of the land and knew of a butte and a place where his people could be safe. Had he not embraced whatever it was that led him to begin to come out into the woods like this and learn and connect, he would have had nothing to offer. And they would have desperately needed a different route in order to find protection. What I'm getting at and what I'm saying here is you cannot judge your steps based on what you see, what you think, what you feel. You have to work outside of that clouded mask that those steps have provided you. You have to assess the world around you and what it is that you have to offer. Behind any little crack, any little scar, any little label or title that you put on yourself, it really is irrelevant, because when you look at who you are, and we get back to the beginning of this video and we talk about that energy that we carry that ends up being misdirected because we think it's for us to carry until a shiny day like today. We don't look at those cloudy days, those stormy, rainy days, the days that hurt, because when you think about it, none of us wish, none of us hope that those rainy days, that those storms are coming. We know that they're a part of life, absolutely. However, we don't look at the resources that are within us to build a shelter, to help us to climb through the thicket of the storm. It's just something to think about as I break down camp here and I get ready to hit the trail. These are thoughts that I hope help you, and I would love to connect with you and help you along the road of your journey. Remember, every journey begins with one simple step, and sometimes the most powerful moments of those journeys come when you think outside the box. So swing over to projectmindfully-outdoors.co and book a call, because I'd love to help you out. We talk soon. This portion of Project Mindfully Outdoors is brought to you by our friends at Caliber Coffee. Their vision is simple: to bring sweet and amazing high-quality coffee to your cup while sharing their passion for the Second Amendment. They're sourced from farmers all around the world who roast their beans locally so that they can bring you the freshest batch possible. And best of all, Caliber Coffee is owned and operated by the veterans, by the warriors that protect you and I. So you can trust in the fact that when you brew that cup of coffee, you're supporting the people that keep us safe. Visit the link in the show notes and stock up on your coffee today. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to this week's edition of Project Mindfully Outdoors. As always, I'm your guide into the world of all things wilderness meditation, Mike Martin. And I want to thank you for tuning in to this episode. This is an episode that actually, as I sit here and I record, today I'm kind of hunkered down. There's a pretty nasty rainstorm going on. I'm actually out here on the Knobstone Trail making this really challenging through hike, which, obviously for all of us, the efforts in life are always geared toward the idea of testing ourselves to discover exactly what our strengths and what our weaknesses are. And that's what I'm out here doing now, because this is actually one of the more challenging hikes that I've undertaken. Not only in the physical effort that it's taken so far, but also with the weather and then the logistical aspects of it go into it as well. But I think that's a story for another day, and something that when I get done with this and I sit down and reflect, will be a couple of very good and interesting reads within the Wilderness Journal that you'll have an opportunity to read about later. However, looking at today and the fact that I'm kind of hunkered down and not making much progress because of the weather, I thought I'd sit down and put together this week's edition. And on this week's campfire, I've got a very, very interesting, lovely conversation for you that I'm excited to share with my guest, whose name is Emily Garza. And it was really one of those conversations that not only seemed to help me to form a new perspective going into this hike, but also seemed to do a lot for Emily as well too. So I got a feeling that it's a conversation that's really gonna help you out a lot through whatever it is that's along the current road that you're facing, as well as the details and the events that are down the line that you've yet to really see. It's interesting because what I really feel made me want to go ahead and invite Emily onto the podcast was the way that, we set a trajectory for ourselves and we look at where we want to go. And then life hands us this curveball and sends us in a completely different direction. So that as we're standing there looking at this new fork in the road that's come up, we've got to quickly assess not only what we have with us, but what's around us that can help with the struggles of the climb that's coming. And, I think that through her work and being able to navigate that pivot point personally, going from looking at building a career as a wedding planner to facing the pandemic, and then all of a sudden finding yourself becoming a coach and helping other people, which, is one of those things that when you're in those kind of boots and you're helping other people, you often look back and you go, this is interesting, the fact that I'm doing this, because a lot of the time I find myself struggling to figure out things in real time. Because when you're not only helping other people, but you're trying to help yourself at the same time, it's really hard to find the pause button so that you can sit back and grasp what's going on. You just gotta face it. You just gotta come at it and handle it the best that you can. And when you come out the other side, you look at things and you assess what went right, what you could have done better, and how you'll face the next obstacle. So on that note, we're going to kick it over to that word from our sponsor, and I present to you my conversation with Emily Garza. I hope you enjoy. All right, as you know, eating good in the backwoods, it's an art. It's a skill. And when it comes down to it, you need some tools. And that's where I turn to the folks at MSR. This season on the trail, I'm carrying the Dragonfly stove. And I've already had a chance to play with it a few times, and I absolutely love this stove. You know, it's got an unrivaled flame control system. It supports extra wide pots. You can burn multiple forms of fuel on this thing. Everything from light gas and kerosene to diesel and jet fuel. It's compact and light. It doesn't take up much weight or space in the backpack. And it's efficient. So it means your fuel's going to burn longer. There's a link in the show notes that I want you to hit and check out not only the Dragonfly, but also the full line of cooking stoves and everything else that MSR has to offer. So click that link and check out all the tools and resources from MSR. All right, so real quick, hit me with 5 things that you're grateful for today.
I am grateful that I get to start my own business. I am grateful for I am grateful for my super, super supportive boyfriend. I am grateful that I have a little bit of a savings to fall back on if I ever needed to. And I am grateful that I have such a large family who is super loving and always around. I think that was 5. Was that 5? I think
That
that
was
was
5. That was definitely 5. And I think that they're all actually beautiful answers because without that support, it's really hard to not only build but maintain a positive mindset.
Absolutely. I think, especially as an entrepreneur, it's so easy to feel like I'm alone, to feel isolated working from home, and just to not allow myself to have that community. But when I accept the community and really try to just embrace all of the lessons that other people have to share, it makes me feel a lot more, number one, welcomed into the entrepreneurship world, but also just more supported. Like I'm not going through the journey alone. So I always count my blessings with my support network.
See, I really think that was actually an interesting point. I mean, with my work and all, it's extremely isolating. It's extremely
Mhm.
difficult to spend all those hours, alone on the trail or alone in the car going from point A to point B. And it gives you a lot of time to think, a lot of time to put life into perspective. And
Definitely.
it's one of those like fundamental building blocks to building a healthy mindset. But it's also one of those things that I remember looking back on older chapters of my life is a very scary sort of
Mm.
thing to do.
Totally. Because I think there's a lot of layers to that. I definitely have felt super isolated. And in that isolation, I kind of dug myself a little deeper into it, just naturally, as almost a reaction to it. And I really had to be a lot more intentional and present with my gratitude practice. So that way I was for sure acknowledging all the support that I had and acknowledging all of the support that I had. That's a great way to say it. I don't know why I tried to repeat it. But it's so hard to do that naturally because honestly, the way that our brain is wired is we remember the negative. We remember the isolation more than we remember the support. And so bringing that back up into the forefront of our mind, I find is one of the keys to not only shifting your mindset, but just being more effective in almost everything that you do.
I think, you hit on a really important point in there is the fact that it's the negatives that are so quick to come up when we look back at the trail. And then we like to take that negative and being the unique creatures that we are, we like to spin a story that brings out, highlights that negative. So
it's almost like we're kicking ourselves in the foot before we ever even start stepping down that trail of mindset. We've got to work from the back end of it and deconstruct that, build into it. And then we also like to jump onto buzzwords,
Mhm.
labels, because I don't know, it seems like through interactions, the more conversations I've had, like if you don't have a way to label yourself, you don't have a way to identify yourself.
No, totally. I love everything that you just said. And I think something that I really connected with was the fact that you just like have to kind of know and you kind of have to just go for it and acknowledge it. And that right there is so hard to do when you're in a negative headspace. Because when you're in that negative headspace, like you said, you just repeat these negative storylines over and over and over again. And it's like, how do you escape that cycle? How do you get out of the negativity and actually embrace all the positivity that there is around you? And stepping away and acknowledging all the positivity is so simple in theory, but in practice, it takes a lot of intention and effort and practice, actually. So I totally relate to the challenges of that journey.
And we get caught up in like the concept of we just got to produce, we got to produce, we got to produce.
Mhm.
So in that process, we stop looking for the signs that would instantly pull us out. And I'll give you a great example because a couple weeks ago, I was hiking through a portion of Yellow Springs down in Ohio, and has become kind of tradition when I get together with my hiking partner to sit down and record a meditation video. And through that process, I was, that morning kind of curious and questioning myself. I was like, am I really on the right path? Is this really what I need to be doing? And when I sat down, I started meditating on that. I As I asked out loud within my mind for a sign, for direction. Well, as we got further down the path, we came to this clearing and we ran into a nice sized deer. And he kind of stood there and looked at me for a few minutes. And I looked off to my right and there was another one. And I thought, I'm in an interesting spot. It's not hunting season. I can't hurt nothing by scaring them off. So let me try to walk out there. And they were probably about a good 100 paces out. I got about halfway out there and I looked up and I noticed that there was about 10 deer altogether just circling
Oh,
me. And I think that was one of those ideas that was one of those definite you're on the right track kind of moments.
yeah, that was definitely the universe telling you, like, hey, keep going. That's
Exactly.
really a beautiful story. I love just that image of like all these surrounding you and you just kind of like hiking. That's such a cool image to have. I love that. I think we all definitely can have those moments, but what I find so key in what you said is you kind of prepped yourself for that moment. You asked and you like let your body know that you were looking for an answer. And honestly, that I feel like is something that so many of us skip over because we're so in a rush to do whatever it is or to go at it and be productive or whatever it may be. But if we just took that second to like hone into our bodies and our mindset and to really just kind of discover your intuition and discover what the universe has to say back to you, that moment is beautiful for every single person. And it also looks different for every single person. So I love that example. I think that's a beautiful one that you should definitely keep sharing.
There's actually been a lot of experiences like that. I mean, to me, and what I do, it's about tying into nature, obviously, and looking for the signs in it. And, another thing that we struggle a lot with when we're building these mindsets that we're trying to employ in our life is we deal with the anxiety of it. And there's a story that I've shared a number of times where was it last season or the season before? I was out hunting and it was the height of the rut, cold, miserable day. There was a blizzard going on, and
Gosh.
I I hadn't seen anything all morning, and then out of nowhere walked this beautiful, amazing dog. I'd never seen him before in my life. And one of my golden rules about hunting is if I have to have a connection with the
Mm,
animal that I'm taking down. And because I've never seen him before, I let him walk. And I'm sitting there in the tree, thinking to myself, it is like 3 or 4 degrees outside. It is snow is coming down. It is miserable. I call myself a hunter. Why am I not pulling the trigger? What am I doing here? And I mean, he gave me 3 or 4 good opportunities too. And then I thought about it. At that moment, what was on my heart was the anxieties that I deal with.
mm.
And here we are at the height of the rut. I ended up naming him Longhorn because he had just a beautiful rack. And it being that time in the afternoon, he should have been nowhere around. But
Interesting.
there he was, because it was the rut, he had put his guard down in order to do his job, which was further his species. So as I sat there and I thought, especially on the walk back to the truck, I thought about my relationship with anxiety. And if Longhorn can put his guard down knowing he's on the menu for everything, especially that time of the year, all the hunters that are out in the field, then why can't I put my anxiety down long enough to walk through whatever it is that's got me triggered?
That is such a that's the $1,000,000 question, isn't it? Why can't I put my anxiety down? Why can't I put my overwhelm down? Like, and then you always have an example of just like your example, either you see it happen and manifest in nature, or you can see someone else kind of act the way that you wish you could act. And then it kind of answering that question, I feel like could really go two ways, but you definitely want it to go in the more positive way, of
Right.
course, and the empowering way. But just the way humans function, we typically end up going the negative way. We'll list all the reasons. Well, I can't get over my anxiety because of X, Y, and Z, and that's why. And we kind of get into this victim blaming mode. And if we catch ourselves in that mode, that's always a good sign. And oh, you know what? This is a moment where I kind of need to step back and not look for blame and other things, but more ask myself, like, what's hindering me from overcoming that anxiety? What's hindering me from shifting my mindset, from looking at this at a different perspective? And if you can ask yourself and answer that question, a lot of the times you'll have your next steps kind of in front of you. And I love that you asked yourself that question. I think asking yourself that question in nature is probably the best way to answer that question, honestly.
In reality, it was one of those things that I just kind of evolved as
Yeah.
like, reading and studying about people throughout history that I look up to. For
Hmm.
example, the expansion out west led by Daniel Boone was based on the fact that I guess nowadays you'd call it social anxiety. To put it a simple way,
I didn't know
it
that.
it was, for example, coming across the wilderness road. Him and his crew dug out the road. He found a spot he thought he liked, brought the family. All of a sudden, here come all these other pioneers and settlers behind him. So he had to pick it up and he had to continue to move.
I think post COVID, we can all really relate to that, honestly.
Right.
Yeah, I
And
feel
and another great example of the idea of communing with yourself within nature would be
mhm.
on the other end of that, the great Lakota chief Crazy Horse. In the midst of everything that was going on, that was his safe place to go answer the great questions that were on his mind that he needed to provide an answer for his people.
I love that. I feel like I definitely try to do, granted, I live in Los Angeles, so there's not too much nature around me within the city itself. I actually live in between two freeways, so you don't think of nature when you think of Los Angeles. But I definitely try to take breaks every single day, go outside, go for a walk, and just listen to whatever nature I can, and use that as a way to, number one, calm down my mind, but also just how you mentioned, to just reconnect with whatever answer I'm looking for, and to kind of give myself that space and the grace to take a mental break and allow the universe to just kind of bring it to me. I think that's one of the best parts of my workday is when I do take that break and go outside and allow nature to kind of work for me. It's really beautiful and one of the best things.
It adds so much to the color palette. You know, when you think about how we're painting a picture based off of trying to get this mindset that gets our wheels spinning so that we can go to whatever destination we think we see. We
Mhm.
can start building that voice that expresses what it is we believe we are. And, you know, without doing those fundamental steps, it not only hinders your growth personally, but it also hinders that productivity that we're all striving for.
Absolutely. I think so many people view productivity as getting more done in less time and hustling and grinding and just go, 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 all this action. When in reality, productivity is really about being in a productive state of mind. It's not necessarily about all of the results that you're looking to get, but it's about the act of being productive. And how can you do that if your mindset is muddled, if you feel rushed inside your head, if you're not connected with your priorities, if you're not connected with the abundance that the universe has to offer? It's a lot harder to actually be productive. And then I feel like that's kind of why we have this whole societal cultural rush to boost productivity right now, is because we're missing that mindset piece and we're just skipping over it, trying to produce, produce, produce without trying to reflect and analyze and understand. So I totally agree with you in that sense.
I think those are the most important building blocks on it, you know,
Mhm.
is taking the time to reflect, to question what it is that went on through the day. You know, Epictetus wrote a lot about the idea of taking all the events throughout the course of the day, and at the end of the day, putting up for review and
Mhm.
judgment through journaling, talking with others. And this is how you start to actually put your footing on the ground. You build confidence that begins those wheels of mindset and productivity.
Absolutely. Because at the end of the day, confidence really comes from action. And reviewing your day is such a simple yet powerful action that you can take. And just to provide a little example, the way I personally will review the end of my day, whether it's a work day or a weekend or I'm traveling, whatever the case may be, I always review my day at the end of it. And I'll just do a simple stop, start, and continue chart, analyze what worked for me today, what didn't work for me today, what's one thing that I can change for tomorrow. So I'll always do that. And then I always end the day with a gratitude practice. And I go through what I was grateful for throughout the day. And I do try to make sure that I'm grateful for any challenges that came my way. And I try to spin it. So it's like, I'm grateful I had the opportunity to overcome XYZ, or I'm grateful I had the chance to learn that this is a problem for me, and just like try to really spin difficult moments into, okay, what lesson was this, what can I take from this and apply later in my life. And I think just doing those two things, stop, start, and continue, and then a gratitude practice, is so profound in helping shift your mindset, because then you can apply that one change tomorrow. And when you apply that one change, you build your confidence and you feel so good about following through. And then you just keep doing that every single day. So my motto is move 1% forward at a time, because as long as you can move 1% forward every single day, pretty soon you'll be over 100%. And then at the end of the year, you'll be 365%. So it's even better. But I totally connect with what you just said.
You know, I think an important part within that is the idea of looking at things and then re-examining them further down the road. Though, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like we talked a little bit before we started recording about the backgrounds and my favorite book, the book that's been so powerful in my life, The Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. If you go through there, you not only pick up the wisdom and experiences that he wrote to himself without the intent of anybody ever reading it, but a part that people kind of poke at a little bit is the fact that a lot of it is repeated over and over again. And that helps us to build that mental muscle memory, if you will. Because
Mm-hmm.
to say, okay, these things within our approach worked. However, this part didn't work. So if I look at the part that worked again, I can probably find somewhere in there that I can build the bridge over that stream that's in the way. I don't want to walk through it.
Yes, I love that. And I totally think that whenever you look at what didn't work, you can really take from what worked and you can really apply what already works for you and just shift it a little bit so that way whatever didn't work for you can work for you. And then I love what you said about, and then don't forget to review it again. And
Right.
later in, whether it's later in the week, month, quarter, whatever it is, constantly checking in. I think that's really the main point is just consistently following your intuition and making sure that you are, doing the actions that are in your power to shift in a more empowering state of mind. Because at the end of the day, that's really the goal.
And there's a part in there because everything has two sides to the coin. There's the
Hmm.
good stuff that we've talked about repeating and looking at and going through over and over again. But on the other side of the coin is the part that nobody likes to look at, their
Yeah.
failures. And you've got to acknowledge them. You've got to, as we talk about this idea of communing with yourself, is how you build this mindset.
Mhm.
You've got to realize that when you're doing this, there is no audience. Just like Meditations was written for himself as his journal. A lot of us have a journaling practice. If you don't, then it's probably worthwhile to pick up if you're really trying to make that effort to improve yourself. But looking at that, realizing that there are no judgmental eyes on you because you are trying to improve with what you're doing by examining each step of your day. It makes going through shame, scare, the fear, the anxiety of, man, I really screwed up this part today, feel less daunting.
Absolutely. I love that because I feel like so often I hear whether it's from clients or friends or whoever, but I'll mention that I journal, that I meditate, that I go to therapy and just, do these things that were probably considered taboo a couple years ago and not really accepted in the normal culture. And people definitely are like, oh my gosh, like you couldn't catch me journaling or you couldn't like, and it's almost like we have this notion that people are always watching us. And maybe that comes from social media and just the digital age that we're in, but reminding ourselves that this is a personal practice. This is not for anyone else's eyes or ears. This is all about you and the internal. It's not about the external. So I love that you said there's no audience there because that's so key for remembering that growth isn't about the outside world. It's really about what is inspiring you to become the best version of yourself. And then how can you take simple, easy to do actions and adjustments? And then how can you look at your failures as lessons instead of failures and move forward with that? So,
I feel like, yeah, actually touched on a place that's actually really valid to go in this conversation is the impact of social media
mm,
on how we develop our mindset. We see all the positive things and all these great things that everybody in the world's getting to do, and we want to do them. We want to be those people. We almost kind of lose sight of the fact that That's them. We are a unique individual ourselves, and we get to write our story. Is working for them may not work for us. So when we try their path and it doesn't work, we get down. We get stuck in that negative.
Totally. And I think another reason why we can get so down on ourselves is because we end up comparing ourselves to people's selected, very curated highlight reels of their life. Social media doesn't actually show reality, it shows whatever people want it to show. So remembering that not all of the bumps in the road, not all of the hiccups or the hard parts and the challenges are going to be on someone's social media. They're only going to highlight all of the best stuff. And so remembering that and not comparing yourself to someone's like A+ game is just really, really key in order to avoid that comparison trap.
It's funny because as I'm listening, I'm thinking of this old Native American story where it revolves around this guy that he had no actual purpose in his life, or so he thought. So that made him feel very negative and very alone. And because of that, it inspired him to go out and really form this intimate connection with the land based off of hunting, based off of just hiking and exploring. And, in the real world, he was kind of just, your common everyday regular old Joe who was never invited to any work or councils or anything of the sort, never had a eagle feather. And he eventually, though, he won a wife. And with her, they had a daughter who was everything that he wasn't. So that pushed him deeper into the woods because she was well liked, very well known, and that obviously hurt. He had resigned himself to that was his mindset became my purpose was to meet this woman and have my daughter. And he come back from one of his exploration trips, find that all the men from the camp were off on a war raid. And then the next day, a scout came back and told the camp that there was a war party on its way to attack them. All that was in camp was old men, some children, and some women. Obviously, they couldn't defend themselves well, and had they decided to flee on horseback, the war party would have caught them real quick. Well, this young man, having that intimate connection, knew of a butte that would protect them. They could climb up, and it was no more than like a day away, and they'd be safe. So everybody in the camp counseled and agreed to go along. And a day and a half later, whatever, they got up. It was hard to climb, but they all made it. And then as the war party caught up, they defended them and pushed them off. But when they got back, everybody in the tribe honored him with this new name. They started calling him Good Trail because obviously the trail that he knew was good, and his life had taken this turn. But he never gave up. Is the point? Because yeah, that is what a lot of us face is we feel that neglect, we feel that hurt, that anger. We just sit in the corner, right? We let the world dictate to us what we're going to do. But Good
Mhm.
Trail going out, getting that well acquainted with the land, wound up saving people because he had that mindset.
Totally. I love that. I feel like that the lesson there is really you just kind of have to trust the universe that your purpose will arrive if you don't currently feel it. Something you said when we were chatting before we hit record was that you can stumble into your purpose. And I really liked that saying because I think it's so true. And I feel like this story very much reflects that too. And also just my journey as well. Like I never planned on being a productivity life coach. In fact, I was going to be a wedding planner and then COVID hit and totally pivoted. Did not expect to go this route, but thank God I did. I would never trade it for the world. And so it's just about trusting the process when you cannot see the destination. And that's really challenging to do. And it's typically in those moments when the fixed mindset can really hinder us from having that trust. And the fixed mindset can also prevent us from taking actions to build that trust. So it's really important to kind of catch yourself when you're saying, when you find yourself, oh no, I can't do this, I won't do that, I don't know how, I don't have, and saying all of these things, catch yourself and be like, what do I have? What can I do? And kind of get curious. Like we've been talking about through this whole podcast, is curiosity is really the cure for that.
It is. It's the curiosity, I believe, is the hurt or the, how do I say this? Curiosity is the spark that lights the night of fear.
Yes. Oh, very well said. I love that.
And I think about it that way because, when you think about the idea of two, three, group of hikers getting together and hiking through the day, and then the sun starts to set as they get to the thickest part of the trail. And there's bound to be somebody within that group that's scared to go on. And then there's going to be that person that says, even though the needle hasn't really moved too much because now we've come to this roadblock, if we face our fear, there has to be sunshine on the other side.
Yes. And believing that there's sunshine on the other side and having trust in that. And then what I love about that too is sharing that, like saying it out loud and like actually attracting abundance with attitude, I think is so important and so key. So that's really beautiful.
I think that, having that attitude about it sometimes really is what gets you through it. Like
Hmm.
deep down, we've all got that sense of stubbornness, like that little spark that just pushes us on if we choose to listen to it.
Yeah,
And that spark can either be vocalized internally or it can be vocalized by people around us, the world around us. You
hmm.
have to be open to it. I think about toward the end of last fall, me and a hiking partner of mine, we did this really epic, about 25 miles. The goal was to get through it in a day.
Oh my
From
goodness.
before sunrise to whenever it took to finish.
That's
And
impressive.
about 20 miles in, my partner pretty much said they were done. They wanted to give up, just I can't do no more. And at that point, it's stop, drop the backpack, grab some water, sit down, and then just look each other face to face and say, 20 miles in, what are you going to do? Turn around and go to the car now? It's these moments that we get into where it's like we don't feel we can go forward,
Yeah,
but the other option of going backwards, we've moved that needle so much further ahead than we realized
totally.
that to go backwards takes more effort than just to finish the trail.
Absolutely. And I feel like it's the reason so often our initial reaction is to go backwards instead of to power through is because there's uncertainty ahead of us and there's certainty back there. We know what's back there, but we don't know what's up front. And so we want to go to what we know and we want to avoid what we don't know. It's just natural. It's human. And so it's about being okay with that uncertainty a little bit. And again, just like having faith in your actions and having confidence that it's going to manifest in a way that, number one, protects you, but also supports you and allows you to do the things that have been bothering the back of your mind. There's always stuff that we have been wanting to do, thinking about doing, but we just don't think we can. We just don't feel like we can. And we just stay in the comfortable spot of this certainty that we're currently in instead of moving forward. And I love what you said, just take a look behind you and see how far you have come because it's actually a lot farther than you realize.
Well, that voice is what we find when we meet life. If
Mhm.
you think about it, because when we're born, there's an instinct, right? There's an urge that pushes us from our mother's embrace to eventually sitting up because we realize that there's a wider view of the world. Then we start to crawl because we hear something's out there.
Mhm.
And then we stand, and then we fall countless times before we start to walk. But each time we fall, we get back up because we don't know any different. And then we hit this event within our formative years where we fail, and we learn that we can turn back because that's safer, it's easier. So if you highlight that and listen to that curiosity within that you had back before you met the voice of life, it becomes much easier. And I think it's something that if we became more aware of, we worked into our mindsets. As much as we all thrive for productivity and production results, it would come much easier to us.
Absolutely. I think we can every adult can learn so much from children. And just, I have three younger siblings, I have three nephews and a niece. So I'm surrounded by kids all of the time. All of them are 11 and under. So lots of kids around me. And something I love when I'm around them is their curiosity. They always ask questions and they want to know, they want to dig deeper, and they're trying to gain a better understanding of the world around them. And we really lose that going into adulthood. And I think there's a ton of reasons. Having that first event where we fail is definitely one of them. And I think also society kind of plays a role too. If you just think about, let's say, a high schooler asking, "Oh, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And the high schooler says, "I want to be an astronaut." The teacher will probably say, let's think about something that's a little bit more realistic. What can you go to school for? How can we make that actually achievable? And they kind of bring children's dreams a notch down because they're telling them to be realistic. And it's like, why can't we shoot for the stars? Why is that not realistic? And we really limit the curiosity in that sense as well.
We do. And, I think that as we go through life, though, it's almost an invitation to continue to explore. And it gets back to the idea of communing with yourself. You
Totally.
look at the things that you value, things that you enjoy, and I guess, kind of get back to that desire to explore, to blaze a new trail out west, if you will, and find a way to make these things happen. But it takes that fundamental building block of
Mm-hmm.
a mindset and acquiring and constantly evaluating practices. Because,
Absolutely.
obviously in this conversation, we're sitting in drastically different backgrounds. I'm here in a tent off the trail. You're in an office building there, and there is no right or wrong to that. It's what works for you. It's about eliminating that story of self-suffering that we all like to tell ourselves when we play on it with each other. If you look at the environment that you feel the most comfortable, safest, and strongest within, you're able to learn how to embody and then express all of these things that we're trying to achieve by talking about mindset, going
Mm-hmm.
after and developing the practices that we think work.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree. And I think one of the easiest ways to start getting curious and to wonder, okay, where are these pivots that I can make? What kind of adjustments should be happening? Is just simply asking yourself the question, how can I? When you can ask, like, how can I? If there's something that is challenging, if there's a mindset hurdle, a self limiting belief that you're having trouble overcoming, really wondering, how can I? And it gets your brain going because your brain naturally just wants to start answering that question. And when you can just begin the process, you will naturally want to continue to go with it. And then you'll build off of it. And each time you build off of it, your confidence grows and it feels better and better and better every single time. And before you know it, you're making all these shifts and it's not actually a challenge anymore because you're starting to believe in yourself because you've proven that you can take these shifts already.
That question there in there, the why can't I, is like something that I think takes us back full circle at the beginning of this conversation because it's that question that I remember asking as a kid. Why
Mm,
can't I? How can I? You know, just the simple, fun little things that started an adventure. And
totally.
you know, in our whatever stage of life we're in, as that started to dull down, it's not gone. We can achieve and breathe new life into that fire by being grateful for the
Yeah.
things that we encounter. And you know, a good example of that was when we started, and I hit you with the five things you're grateful for. It's those kind of things that if you're open, you're willing, and you sincerely want the change and the evolution within yourself, doing those almost seems silly, but they're little things that spark that childlike mentality that we still carry deep down within.
Totally. And honestly, it's the things that feel silly. Those are probably the things that we should be doing because if they feel silly, but they empower us, but they make us feel better, then maybe they shouldn't be feeling silly. Then maybe we just need to practice it a little bit more so that way it doesn't feel silly anymore. I think a good example of that is meditation. I know when I first started meditating, I felt so silly. I felt so like weird, honestly. Like, if someone walks by, what are they going to think of me just sitting here not doing anything? Like, who cares at the end of the day, you know? No one's going to walk by and judge me for meditating. But I had this like story in my head that I just kept repeating. And I had to really get curious and be like, okay, how can I feel more comfortable with meditating? What is it that I need to do? What shifts do I have to create? And once I was able to make these 1% adjustments, I now love meditation. It's part of my day. I really feel like I can't function without it. And so I never would have thought I would have gotten to this point, though, if you asked me 2 years ago. So it really is about just starting small with the what 1% change. How can I?
It's all about the small steps.
Mm-hmm.
We miss out on that. We lose we lose grip on the fact that it's not always about the drastic step. You know, if you think about going down a trail, is it more beneficial to take 100 steps because they're bigger steps, or is it more beneficial to take 1,000 steps because they're small? Does it even really make a difference?
Good question. I love that question. It makes you think, doesn't it?
It does. And in reality, it doesn't matter the size of the stride or the pace. All that matters is you take the step.
Exactly. All that matters is that you're moving forward.
Exactly.
Doesn't matter how far forward, how fast forward, but movement forward. That's really the goal.
As I like to say, every journey begins with one step,
Exactly. I love that.
and it doesn't matter how big that step is.
And you don't have to know all of the steps ahead of you either. Whether like a lot of the times I feel like some of our goals can be so big and so different than what we're experiencing now that taking that first step is really scary because there's so many steps ahead of us and we're just so focused on all of the stuff that we have to do in the future and all of the growth that we have to go through and it's like okay, yes, that's true. There is growth ahead of you, but you're not there. Just focus on the step that you are on and focus on that momentum that you can make right now. And the rest of the momentum will come when you're ready for it to come. And the reason it probably scares you right now is because you haven't taken the first step yet. You haven't built that confidence by taking action.
That is very well said.
Thank you.
So, actually, as we start to come toward the end of our time, I've got this question that I love to ask everybody after they're all warmed up and ready to go.
Let's do it.
I think it's the only actual question that I ever bothered to ask. But from your journey, from your experiences, share some wisdom and knowledge that's going to inspire and help somebody to take the next step.
I love that. That is a great question to ask, firstly. And I think the biggest tip I can offer is building up self belief and using gratitude as a practice for believing not only in yourself, but in your journey and having trust in your journey and having trust in those steps ahead of you and building that confidence is definitely really about eliminating those self limiting beliefs and fact checking those negative stories that we have in our head and being more grateful that we have the opportunity to shift.
Well, I think to build on that, if you started to adapt the mindset or the view that every thought that you have about yourself and about your journey, about the experiences you've had or that you will have, are nothing more than hypothesis, that
Mhm.
you need to take the time to counsel with yourself and prove or disprove is a very, very important fundamental step. Obviously, we've touched a lot on gratitude within this conversation. So, I feel like when you start to combine those things, the world becomes drastically different. I mean, my journey really shows and highlights that.
Mhm. Yeah. No, it definitely does. And I think it's also very powerful when you can notice your perception of the world change and you actually feel the confidence rising and you feel your attitude shifting and you see it within you. That's a very powerful moment. And so, really capturing that moment, remembering that moment in challenging times, and searching for that moment in future challenging times too is so key. And you really embody that in your journey. So kudos to you.
Well, thank you. I think actually that was one of the hardest parts of the journey was
Mhm.
giving myself credit for the progress.
Yeah,
And if
totally.
you could start to do that, I believe that comes from the idea of building a gratitude practice.
Definitely. Definitely be proud of yourself. Celebrating wins in any form is so key. And just being grateful that you were able to have those wins and sharing those wins with other people and acknowledging them in all domains is so, so key. So can't, I can't agree with you even more.
Well, before I let you go, you have to let people know how they can get in touch with you, work with you, or see what you got coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me at theproductivityflow.com. You can also find me at The Productivity Flow on TikTok, Pinterest, and LinkedIn.
Well, Emily, this has been a very, very fun conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you so, so much for chatting with me. I honestly feel like I got to learn a lot about your journey and you. So thank you so much for sharing. And I am just super grateful for this chance.
We'll have to do it again sometime.
Yes, please, definitely.
All right, folks, it's that time of year again. My favorite time of the year, where we hook up with my TV in order to put together a little fundraiser to support Project Mindfully Outdoors. And I'm hoping that you'll become a part of this because, my outdoor TV is one of those things that I feel helps to inspire us to get out there into the wilderness and take on our own adventures by l- watching and learning from some of the greats out there. I mean, really the app itself is jam packed full of every outdoor TV show that you could possibly be looking for. Our good buddy over at Bear Grease, Clay Newcomb, even just launched a show on there recently that you would definitely want to catch and check out. So there's a link in in the show notes for you. I want you to hit that link, check out that show and everything else that My Outdoor TV has to offer. All right, my friend, that is it. That is all. That is the end. We have reached the end of this rain-soaking edition of Project Mindfully Outdoors. You know, it's crazy because as I sit here and I put this episode together, I listen back to the conversation and do all the magical things that it takes in order to produce a podcast that you can listen to and enjoy, as well as gain all kinds of things from. While I stare out the little crack in my tent, I think, as I watch the rain, about the evolution of not only Emily's journey, but my own, and how it threads itself into the journey that you're taking. You know, we all meet those pitfalls. We all meet those points where we gotta kind of think on our feet. We gotta do things. And in order to maintain or exceed what it is that we're holding ourselves to, that standard. And, you know, it really takes a lot of mindfulness and awareness of the reality of the situation. You know, it's been raining out here for hours upon hours. And even though, you know, the label on my tent says it's waterproof, and I wasn't exactly excited when I seen the forecast, thinking enough in the preparation to pack a tarp to throw over top of this thing is not only proven to be a lifesaver, just like it always does, but it does the job of keeping me dry and keeping me inside of this tent dry. You know, had I not brought that, I'm sure by now, at the rate of the rainfall, I'd be shoveling stuff, water out of here by the bucketful. But because of past experiences that I've had, when that pivot point comes to getting ready, it makes you think a little bit deeper into what it is that you're going into when those pivot points come up. What is it that you already know that can help propel you into that next point and maintain that level, not only where you're standing, but also achieve the success that is out there on the other side of that rainstorm. You know, when I think about something like the moment that I'm sitting here in right now, I'd love to be making progress along this trail, seeing what's out there, but because it's too wet, it's coming down too hard, I gotta kind of bide my time. You know, I've gotta look at the situation a little bit deeper. It gives me an opportunity to study and bring up those old skills and those old resources that I'm carrying and put them to use. So, I think that's gonna wrap this week up. Until next time, my friend, swing over to projectmindfully.outdoors.co and dive nose deep into the wilderness journey, because there's so much from these journeys and these adventures that I enjoy sharing with you in order to help you and inspire you. Till then, till I talk to you next, get out there in the wilderness. It's where the stillness and the adventure lies. See ya.